Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with, sadly, the last in this series of works we couldn't live without. 16 symphonies. I've been saving it up, and you know that. 16 symphonies I couldn't live without. We've covered just about all the other musical forms that it's possible to cover, and we've left out one or two, but there have been 48 videos in this series. And you may note that 48 is 3 times 16. So I've been sneakily working in a little gematria in the way we've been doing this, I mean, Bach isn't the only guy who did numerology. Actually, it doesn't quite work because we started out with 12 operas. So it's 16 times 48 minus 4. That's the number of pieces we've talked about. How much is that? 16 times 48. Well, 10 is 480, and half of that would be 240, which would be 720 plus say less 4 and plus 12, and so it's like 700 and some odd pieces of music that we've mentioned. I mean, and I've mentioned in my list alone there have been 700 and some odd pieces of music, and no repeats. Or I think very few repeats, maybe 1 or 2. I don't know. It's I think a pretty imposing list, and when we add it to what you have contributed, then this series contains quite literally thousands of pieces of music. Hard to believe, isn't it? I mean, isn't it astonishing how quickly it built up, and how just varied and incredible the richness of our classical music heritage is. Because a lot of these pieces are pieces that we would consider to be familiar works. And there are thousands of those. It's really remarkable. I've been looking at the lists that you've been submitting, and they're fabulous. They really are. And I can't thank you all enough for participating. And I think that, if somebody is looking to get into classical music, boy, is this a place to start. What a treasure trove of material. I mean, as always in the classical world, there's too much of it. Okay. You could drown in it. There's so much of it. I understand that. But if you look at the works that get mentioned most frequently, or that come up more than once, or that people have, especially plugged in, some of the wonderful explanations that you've given for your selections, I think that this is really a resource. Just this playlist. And it's just one of almost 5,000 videos on this channel. So just one playlist. So just imagine. It really is astonishing. The sheer amount of music. What a treasure trove this is. And of course, the fact that it's neglected. I get very depressed because, I look at the fact that I'm very proud of the fact, by the way, that we passed 60,000 subscribers as we're ending this series. So I want to thank all of you who subscribed. Tell your friends, get more. But I really am very, very grateful. But then I think that, that on TikTok, there's some Asian pubette who has 5 billion subscribers watching her put on eyeshadow, and I just go, what are our priorities? Well, that's the snob in me, and I'm sorry for it, but it's there. I can't help it. It's just because we all know, all of us, that this is so beautiful and so splendid, and there's so much to discover, and we just want to share it. We want the world to enjoy it. We think it would be a better place for humanity if everybody just loved this stuff. Maybe it would, and maybe it wouldn't, but at least we're having a good time. So I console myself with that, and here is my list of 16 symphonies I couldn't live without. Enough philosophizing. Let's get to the nitty-gritty. Number 1, Haydn, Symphony No. 88. This has been in some of your lists anyway, for various reasons. Oh my, it's the perfect classical symphony. Sorry, Mozart, this is the one. It really is. It's just incredible. Perfect, wonderfully written, totally Haydnesque, full of wit, humor, warmth. That Largo, oh my God, the one that Brahms had an orgasm over. He said, I wish my 10th symphony sounded like that. Why the 10th, I have no idea. But wow, I mean, it is so great. We're going to get to it in our Haydn Symphony Crusade. I don't know, probably take 2 weeks to talk about the whole thing, but actually it won't, but it's an incredible piece. Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony. Well, it's the work that got me into classical music. From Mom's record collection. We talked about it in the Mother's Day Mom video. There it was. Bruegel's The Harvesters, or the Steinberg recording of Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony, and Mom saying to me, look at the picture, listen to the music, look at the picture, listen to the music. Because I asked her what pastoral meant, and I listened to the music, and the heavens opened. And I haven't looked back since. So I had to include that. Mendelssohn, Symphony No. 3, the Scottish. This, for me, was a new one. I mean, I really didn't pay much attention to the Scottish Symphony until I wrote my book on Mendelssohn. And then I listened to it, and it's like finding the Rosetta Stone with Scottish Symphony. First of all, it's a masterpiece all by itself. It is so resonant, as I've said before in my talks on this piece, with works that came later that really, really took this as their model. The model of cyclical form, of the heroic coda that pops up out of nowhere, the method of thematic transformation from one movement to the next. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. Absolutely amazing. And it is by itself a wonderful, turbulent, richly textured hunk of romantic passion. Oh my gosh. It's absolutely marvelous. Dvorak, Symphony No. 8. I don't think I've talked about the 8th all that much. The 8th is sort of like Haydn 88, actually. They both have 8s in their titles, right? It's so unlike anything else that anyone else was writing, and so successful as a sui generis example of a symphony that breaks all the rules, but at the same time manages to be completely and totally successfully symphonic. Even Brahms was puzzled, because remember, Dvorak wrote his 7th, which he wrote under the influence of Brahms' 3rd Symphony, and he said it must be something to shake the world, bloppity bloppity blop, and it did. It was wonderful. It shakes. I'm shaking. But the 8th he wrote for himself. It was his favorite. It's the most unlike anyone else. And Brahms took one look at it and said, "What is that? I mean, it's really beautiful and all that, but what is it?" He had no idea. And that's a good thing, because the more befuddled Brahms was, the more we know Dvorak was onto something. And he really was. It's incredible. Then Tchaikovsky, Symphony No. 5. This was a piece that was on my mom's top 10 playlists, the 5th and the 6th, both of them. But the 5th particularly, and it's the one I've seen the most live with my parents. It has a real personal sort of meaning to me, because I think of it as our family symphony. It's beautiful. I saw it in London with Lauren Mazel. The Rite of Spring was on the first half of the program at the Barbican, and then we saw Lauren Mazel do it again in New York, and we've had many experiences of this. We saw it in New Haven with the New Haven Symphony. We saw, I don't know, I always seemed to have a parent around when this was going, and then they love it, and so we would always go, and and it always works, especially the slow movement. Oh my God, that big tune, and the ending, which everybody, all the critics say is false and artificial and terrible, and even Tchaikovsky said it was shallow and unconvincing, and it just brings the house down every time. Because one thing I've learned about audiences is that, they go, first of all, because they want to be there. That's number one. Number two, they just take the music as it comes, at face value. They're not sitting there thinking, maybe this ending is not the most, structurally inevitable thing Tchaikovsky could have. Well, they don't care. It sounds fabulous. And there are moments when you have to just shut up and listen. And that's what we do with Tchaikovsky's 5th. Mahler, Symphony No. 2, The Resurrection. Oh yeah, it was my first encounter with Mahler, the Stokowski recording, which really isn't all that good in some ways, but in other ways, in terms of bringing home the bacon at the very end, well, that's pretty good. And my gosh, it just blew me away. Totally blew me away. It was an hour and 20 minutes, and it went by in 30 seconds. I was totally unconscious of time passing. An amazing, amazing piece of music. And every time I've seen it live, it reduces me to a puddle of emotional, I don't know what. It's incredibly exhilarating and thrilling, and it's unbelievable, really unbelievable. Sibelius, Symphony Number 1. I know that's going to be controversial. People will say the 5th, the 7th, the 6th. Sibelius snobs will say the 3rd. You know, the ones who are into sublimity will say the 4th. I love Sibelius's first. First of all, I've played it live a couple times. I've actually even played bits of the timpani part. It's way beyond my ability, but I was able to do some of it. It's a test piece for timpanists, by the way, because the timpani you're playing constantly. It's almost like a continuo for timpani. But beyond that, it has such spontaneity in it. It's so beautiful, and I love the ending because Sibelius always had problems with his endings, and even this finale is a little patchwork, formally speaking. But he manages to get the end to be the same as the end of the first movement, and it stays in a minor key all the way to the end, which I think is very, very cool. It's incredibly rare. Nobody gives it any credit for doing that, but yeah, I mean, emotionally, it's a tragic piece. And again, people don't think about that at all. It's got the huge tune at the end that Tchaikovsky would have been jealous to have written. I mean, come on. It's just splendid. Absolutely splendid. I like it much better than the Second Symphony, which is the most popular one, of course, the one that everybody talks about as sort of the archetypal Sibelius symphony. It's really not. But I think that the first just has that wonderful cusp between the late Romantic and the sort of the classicist to come. It never fails to work for me, and I don't see it live all that often. You know, everyone does the later Sibelius symphonies, and I don't get it. Albert Roussel, Symphony Number 2. Now, my first Roussel symphony that I encountered was the third. That's the one that everyone pushes because it's in his, neoclassical, mature format, whereas the second is a bit more, again, it's transitional. It's between the late Romantic and his later, more, classical phase. It's a very austere piece. It really is. It's in 3 movements. It's dark. Again, it's somewhat tragic in its overall feeling, or at least it's not tragic. It ends softly in uneasy calm. Let's put it that way. But it's an extraordinary masterpiece, and it's very rarely performed because of the quiet ending, because it's harmonically sort of chromatic and gnarly, but it's incredibly powerful. One of the very, very greatest post-Frankian symphonies. It's in cyclical form. It has a motto, ba da 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 da, like that. And it has got a couple tunes that come back in the movements. Bum ba da 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 dum ba da da dum ba da. That does that in all the movements. But it's great. It's just really, really an astonishing work. I was so happy to get to know it. It took me a while. It takes a little time to get into, but when you do, wow! It has its own spirit, its own atmosphere. Nielsen's Fifth, simply one of the greatest pieces of music by anybody ever, about anything, for any reason, from anywhere, any kind. Done. Nothing else that needs to be said. If even Furtwängler conducted it, oh, that must have been a mess. Can you imagine? But yeah. It has a completely unique form, a totally wonderfully clear emotional progression from, placid laziness to hostility to nobility to the conflict between the two, which just completely obliterates both of them, and then the resurrection in the second movement and the working out 2 fugues to the final triumphant chords. My God, it's a work of screaming genius. It really is. So after Nielsen, Shostakovich's 13th, Babi Yar. It's another piece of music that just reduces me to a puddle every time I hear it. I mean, it is so powerful, so deeply moving, so bitter, so compassionate, so human. It's the outcry of a truly great soul. And after you hear it, you feel privileged to have been able to witness this sort of thing. I really just, that Shostakovich could create this when he did, where he did, under the circumstances, and make it such a powerful, direct, musically cogent. I mean, it's got wonderful thematic transformations running through it. It's a real symphony. And, even though it's for bass and men's chorus, wow. I mean, it makes me perspire just thinking about it. It's that intense. And, you may prefer, Shostakovich's 10th or the 8th or some of the purely instrumental works, but I think this is his artistic testament. I really do. It's an extraordinary work, absolutely extraordinary. Vaughan Williams, A London Symphony. Oh, what a wonderful cinematic Technicolor masterpiece A London Symphony is, isn't it? I mean, it's everything you think English music should sound like. I mean, it really is. It's funny. You've got sort of green sleevesy type modal harmonies and catchy tunes and pentatonic scales, and you've got the gorgeous misty, transom bells over the Thames, and the gorgeous theme and the slow movement and the march, the Salvation Army march and the finale, and gosh golly, I mean, it's if we lost all the rest of English music except for a London Symphony, we would know that a great civilization had once dwelled there. It's a great piece. Alberic Magnard, Symphony No. 4. Another one of the great symphonies in the Franck tradition. Franck isn't on this list, actually. It probably should have been, but I had to do 16. The Magnard Fourth is another really powerful, passionate piece. Based on a motto tune. Ya da da, ya da 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 da, da 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 da. There we go. A little octave transposition doesn't hurt. Wow, what a find this thing was. I mean, the recording that introduced it to me was Michel Plassans, which is quite good on EMI. It's a little bit thick in terms of the sonics are a little furry and echoey. But then Thomas Sanderling did it on Bis, and that really nailed it to the post. What a great recording! And since then, it's been recorded 3 or 4 times. Or 5 times, or at least. I mean, there's a whole bunch of Magnard symphony cycles now, and he was a seriously important symphonist. All of his symphonies are good. They really are. The third was magnificent. It was Ernest Ansermet's last major recording, or one of them, and they're all worth hearing. But the fourth is really, really special. My gosh. If he had not been blown up by Germans during World War I when he was defending his farm from the advancing German army, well, who knows what he might have done afterwards. But as it is, it's a phenomenal work. Martinu, Symphony No. 6, his Fantaisies symphoniques. Wow, what a cool work this is. My goodness. Martinu's symphonies are notable for using harps and pianos and things to make a kind of characteristic neoclassical brittle sonority. It's wonderful stuff. But here's a symphony that doesn't use any extra instruments and is the most lush and exotic sounding of all. It's an incredible piece of orchestration. The opening is like a cloud of buzzing insects, and so's the opening of the second movement. They're both like clouds of buzzing insects. And then there's the climax of the finale that sounds like what I imagine to be a nuclear reactor in meltdown mode. Oh boy. And it's also full of really tart Czech style influenced melodies. Ya da 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 da, ya da da, ya da 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 da, ya da 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 da. Great stuff. Absolutely great. Charlie Ives, Symphony No. 2. I like the fourth too. It's his craziest symphony, the most radical. But the second is well, it reminds me of home. I mean, you all know this by now. My father was from Danbury, which is where Ives was from. I went to the high school that Ives went to, Hopkins Grammar in New Haven, and we used to do all this Ives stuff, and all the tunes in the Second Symphony we're familiar with. I mean, I was familiar with, his Yale, where, oh, where are the pea green freshmen, and where, oh, where are the pea green freshmen, and it's just so much fun. It really is. And it's another, a lot of these pieces I've been talking about are, Sibelius 1 and Roussel 2 and this one, they're transitional works. They're between worlds. there's something wonderful about that, I think. I know a lot of people prefer to have like mature, it's all this or all that. I like the ambiguity. I really do. And this is one of those symphonies. It's becoming something very strange, but it still has its roots firmly in tradition. And there's something wonderful about that. So the Ives Second Symphony, I think, is just it's a wonderfully powerful and refreshing piece of music. Hindemith Symphony in E flat. Nobody did this symphony. Nobody. I mean, Adrian Bolt recorded it very clunkily. There were some East German ones that were also very clunky. But Bernstein, whoa, he ripped into it like it's the Star Wars soundtrack, which it kind of sounds like in the first movement. And boy, was that exciting. Holy mackerel, what a masterpiece. And if Bernstein hadn't recorded it, would anybody care? I mean, since then, Jean-Pascal Tortelier made a good recording of it. There were a couple, but others, very few. It's still not a popular work. I don't know why. It's half an hour in cyclical form, and it has a fabulous funeral march slow movement. Yeah, da 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 do do do. Well, never mind. It's Hindemith. But wow, what a piece. With a huge finale, a big, huge, thrilling finale with a dazzling final climax. Great stuff. Absolutely great stuff. It's a tragedy that it's not better known. But I don't really care because I know it. And if I'm the only one, well, I'm the only one who has to be happy with it, right? The rest of the world can do what it wants. Finally, last but not least, another major discovery, George Lloyd, Symphony No. 5. We gave the world premiere. Well, it was sort of the U.S. premiere. New York Symphonic Arts Ensemble, remember it? You heard it here first because I was in touch with Lloyd, and he sent us the music of the parts and only asked that we play it after he gave the world premiere performance himself. I think it was in Brighton. So we waited till he'd done it first, and then we did it. He had recorded it before then, and of course there was an earlier recording on Lyrita with Edward Downes. So we knew the work. We knew the work from recordings. And I remember, when I was running the repertoire committee with the orchestra, and I said to them, we really ought to do George Lloyd's Fifth. And of course they looked at me like, who? But we'd have a meeting, a big repertoire committee meeting, and it would always be in my apartment, my little tiny studio apartment. I'd stuff 6 people into it, and I would pull out a stack of CDs and I would play them and say, let's do this, all of the music he'd given since this, he'd given it to the Fleischer collection, so you can get it easily from the Free Library of Philadelphia. But until then, we had to get it from Lloyd himself, and I remember he mailed it to us on like a slow boat. I mean, he thought he'd sent it airmail, but in English, the post, the royal, whatever it's called, the royal post sent it on a boat. And we had to go to this enormous facility in New Jersey, in Weehawken, New Jersey. There's a huge distribution facility to find our package. And it's like 5 acres of building. You never think you're going to find it. But they knew exactly where it was. It's amazing. And we got it. We drove in there and picked it up. I was with our conductor, Alex Guzman, who's a wonderful, wonderful man. And delightful conductor who was willing to do anything. He was the best sport in the world. And we got our George Lloyd Fifth, and we did the premiere. And oh, what a beautiful work it is. It begins with a pastoral movement that's one of the prettiest things you've ever heard in contemporary music. And it's got a fabulous slow movement that sounds a lot like Tchaikovsky in places. It's just a great piece. Absolutely great piece. Brilliant and exciting, and a full hour of tremendous modern/romantic music. And that's a great place to end. I think my 16 symphonies I couldn't live without. I am just dying to see your list. You can repeat composers if you want. Remember, it's up to you. It's your list. You don't have to do 16 if you don't want to, but only 16. I've been deleting people who go over. I can't believe there are people who can't count to 16. I guess there are. What can I tell you? So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me, and thank you so much for participating in this series. This has just been a blast. I got to figure out something else that'll be equally fun that we can all do together, because this one was just great. So take care, and thanks again.